It ain't much of a day to go out boating, that's for sure, or fishing. I don't even think you can get away from this wind. She went all the way into Hinchinbrook. So today's episode is going to be a little bit different. Well, there's no, there is no fishing because, as you saw from the footage before, conditions are a bit how you doing out there, so I'm not really interested. It is stinking hot. So I just thought today we'd talk a little bit about whether I wanted to upsize or downsize, whether you want to upsize or downsize. I don't know. I've had a lot of boats in my lifetime. I've had the largest boat I ever had was 5.3 meters. It wasn't really that big. A Haynes Signature, big heavy boat, and it had a 150 Black Max on it. Went like a bat out of hell. Really good. Every time we took it out, it was $100. It was $100 a day. And this was 20 years ago when fuel wasn't all that dear. I'm going to cook some bacon, some eggs and a hash brown, but I just wanted to mention something. This little thing here has got to be one of the best value items that I've ever bought. I like to cook and all that sort of stuff, and in later episodes we're going to be doing some catch and cook stuff. Okay, this little Camp Master, I think I only paid about 25 bucks for that. And yeah, of course you can't compare that to the little Camp Master. So what's the analogy here? Well, I guess it's about that sometimes the simple things can still do the basic similar or same things that something that is a lot more complex, a lot more expensive, perhaps a lot larger, with more features can do. But I can assure you, the bacon and eggs that came off the little camp stove are just as good as the bacon and eggs that would have come if I would have cooked them on the $1,800 stove. $25, $1,800, of course. The big ones in the kitchen, so you can't really compare. But how does it relate to boats? Well, I've got a Quintrex Busta 420, and it does a lot of things for a price that is, a fraction of the cost of a boat, say twice its size. Do I want to upgrade my boat, my Quintrex 420 Busta, to something larger? Now this is something that I've been thinking about in the last couple of months. So, not a lot about fishing today. Guys, please feel free to comment. Your comments are great because the exchange of views is what keeps the conversation going. So, I just go over a few things, in relation to my boat that I find important. For me, the boat I had prior to this was a 17-foot Coxcraft Rum Runner. It was a great boat, but it was just too heavy. It had a 115 Optimax on it. Was also a really good motor. It was a great boat, but it was really, really heavy, and it was just too heavy for me to manhandle around. Yeah, so after owning a few very heavy fiberglass boats in the past, and the last one, it was a 17-foot Coxcraft. I couldn't move the bastard around. Every time it had to be moved a little bit, I had to actually hook it up to the ute. In the end, it just became a real chore. So when I decided to downsize, I was looking at 14-foot tinnies, because I already had a 14-foot tinny down south. I had an Angler Pro, a 424 Chaser, which was a great boat. I bought it as an open runabout hull. So the only luxury I did have on that Suzuki 40, it was just a non power trim model, but I did get electric start. That was you know, a prerequisite. Look, eventually I put a center console on it, and I changed the center console to a side console, and that was a great boat. I really enjoyed it, and I sold it, you know, quite a few years ago. So when I revisited the downsizing, I said to myself, I want a boat that I can move around on my own, that I can put in the water on my own where there's no pontoons. Because launching the Coxcraft at Clump Point where there was pontoons was no issue, but launching it where there were no pontoons, that was an issue. Particularly in places, boat ramps where, you know, where it was known for there to be crocodiles. Well, who wants to fuck around with them? Not me. And at that time, I also had a 12-foot tinny. I had a 12-foot, I think it was a Nomad. Anyway, when I took it into Hull River a few times, we had some issues with the motor. It was a 20-horse, two-stroke something motor. I can't remember whether it was a Merc or not. But I do remember my mate getting in the boat, and the motor was starting to play up, and he said, "Oh, do you reckon we ought to go back?" And I said, "Yeah, probably." And then both of us were looking at a 6-foot croc about, I don't know, probably about 20 meters away from us in the water, just having a look at us very briefly, and then it fucked off. And then we looked at each other and said, nah. And then after that I thought to myself, you know what, yeah, this boat is a little bit small. Now even now 14 foot doesn't seem to be a much larger than a 12 foot. The size of this boat here doesn't compare to that 12-foot tinny. So I decided, I sold the Coxcraft and I sold the 12-foot Nomad, and then decided I'm going to buy the boat that I think is going to be right for me. So I wound up with a Quintrex 420 Busta. I'd already had experience with a 14-foot boat in the past, and that was a very great, very good experience. It was an Angler Pro 424. Have a look, one of my previous videos, I actually do a comparison between the 420 Busta and the Angler Pro. Anyway guys, please comment. I hope you enjoyed this video, and catch you around the traps pretty soon. Stay tuned. So that's the issue of, you know, that's an issue of us old guys, you know, we don't have the old strength anymore like we used to. So, to me, yep, I can just push this forward, no problems at all. Oops, I better not go too far, because the last thing I want to do is run into the Mrs. Beamer. Okay. Everything in life is related to experience, you know, and I guess because I'm the old guy, you know, I've got a fair few experiences behind myself in boat ownership. I've had, I don't know, last count, probably around 8 or 9 boats or something like that in my lifetime, might even be more. But the main thing to remember is, and I've had them from small, I've had from small as a 10-foot tinny, had a 15-foot de Havilland for a long time, and it was a wonderful little boat, you know. Caught a lot of fish with it, and my boys, you know, sort of grew up with that boat, and they are now both very, very keen sports fishermen. Okay, so to upgrade or not to upgrade, maybe to downsize. For me, the question was several weeks ago, do I want to upgrade? You know, maybe not several weeks, maybe a month ago. probably for the last 9 months or more, thinking about, oh, should I get another boat, the bigger one? You know, we always want bigger. But it was going back to experiences that I already had. You know, I had a 5.3 Trailcraft. I paid $30,000 for that bloody thing. When was that? About 7.5 years ago. Probably nearly 8 years ago. It had a 90 Honda on it. Bought it from a mob in Brisbane. You remember about that Trailcraft, and I was in awe. I was in awe about the actual size of it. It was a huge tub, like 4 or 5.3 size boat. It was just enormous, you know. And I thought, wow, this is going to get me to the reef and back. Not an issue. Of course, first trip out on the Bowley River, had an overheating problem straight away. Anyway, I'm not going to go into any of that because that was just bad luck with buying. But let's stick to the issue in relation to a much larger boat than this 420 Busta. The Trailcraft, when it was actually running, and it was a pleasure to fish out of, you know. In rough seas, like coming back into the Ross River, you know, when you go over those areas up, you know, before you hit the Ross River Harbour, and it gets pretty lumpy in there because, you know, depth over there can be, you know, somewhere between 1.8 and 2.3, depending on the tide, of course. But it was the wettest boat ever. So what really were the disadvantages of that boat compared to the 4.2? Well, number one, you couldn't just climb up over the bow. It was just impossible. It was just way too high, way too high. So you virtually always had to get in from the back of the boat with a ladder, with a boarding ladder, on the boarding platform at the back, because it was very generous in space, and then go through the little transom door to get in, which was good. And it was really nice to have that little platform at the back because, you know, old blokes like myself, once in a while you're going to have a slash while you're out in the water, so you just go through the transom door and you just stand on the back and have a good old piss. That's a bit harder on the 4.2, but it's okay. I can still manage. Right. What was the other issue? Storage. It was really wide and very high. Okay, we could fold the bimini down and all that sort of stuff. It was just a pain to get in and out of when you were working on the boat because it required little step ladders and, you know, and God knows what. Was that a real issue? I don't know. Probably not. It's just, it is a lot easier to get in and out of the 4.2 Busta. For me, that's a plus. So we're living in an era where, you know, our fuel costs have just skyrocketed. And that translates into using the boat as well, because even though, you know, the 40 Yamaha, which is on this Quintrex 420, is very miserly in fuel use. The other day when we went out to Hinchinbrook, you know, I used a good 20 litres, even though it was you know, we travelled a fair bit. 20 litres, you translate that into, you know, with a sort of a premium fuel, you know, you're still talking $38. And now you're upsizing, and then you're going to use a motor, say 90 horsepower up to possibly 200. Well, that certainly changes the name of the game. because each trip you go out, you know, initially you might say, oh yeah, no, fuck that, you know, you used $100, mate, that's all right, you know. You go and do that 4 times a month or 5 times a month, and suddenly that's, you know, that's five hundreds. That's $500. That's nothing to be sneezed at. Was going to be looking at it was a tri-hull. It was an ocean whaler, and but when I started looking into it, it was a 5.65 boat. It's a nice looking boat, and it had a, you know, a low hour Merc on it, 4-stroke Merc, 90 hours I think. But after doing some research and, you know, really thinking about what sort of fishing did I do, what sort of boating did I do, I thought, no. So we're also talking about different characteristics that boats have, whether they are large or small. After doing a lot of Googling and looking at the tri-hull, I decided that there was a consensus out there that they're actually quite a hard riding boat because of the proximity of the tunnels to the surface of the water. Even though the water may be cut from the 3 hulls, they did ride fairly hard apparently in a rough sea. And they steer like shit apparently. It's not a problem you'd have with a monohull. Does it have anything to do with upsizing? No, not really. But I did decide to stop looking, and I decided, you know what? I really, really like my boat. So no, I really like my boat. Tiller steer and all. I've got a beautiful GPS, fish finder, everything is in a comfortable position, and there's plenty of room for me to walk around. No, I'm not upsizing, and I'm not downsizing. I just like this boat exactly the way it is. Thanks for watching. Catch you later.